Of the Growler, Paul Dehner Jr., Jay Morrison here with you. But it's a special episode of the Growler because it's kind of the kickoff of something old and something new, something that Jay and I have done for a long time and loved doing for a long time. Love doing it so much. What did we say, Jay? We should do that more.
Yeah, make the series.
We should do it more often. And so the Game Changers, rewatch an old game and discuss that time, that the legacy, the fallout, all of it. You guys have heard us do these shows before. We're going to start doing them more often. It's going to be a regular series, but it's going to be called My Favorite Game. And every time we're going to bring somebody in to discuss why this particular game or era or whatever was their favorite. And I thought, nobody has loved what we do with this particular segment, with this particular episode, more than one person who basically demands, when is it happening again? I need to do another one. And I said, well, you are the perfect person to kick us off.
Right.
Dan Hoard, you love this and you have a favorite game. And I'm excited to have you. And of course, Mo, here with us as well, because nobody loves discussing old games in excruciating detail more. Dan, thank you for doing this and offering your services here for this episode.
Paul, thank you for the invitation. I am the biggest fan in the world of this segment. The last time you had me on to do one of these, I basically begged you to include me, which tells you how much I enjoy doing it. But it's an honor to be given the opportunity to choose the game this time around. You chose for me last time. So this is going to be my 14th year as the Bengals radio announcer. I went back and counted. I've done 220 regular season and postseason games so far. The game that we are going to review today was played on January 15th, 2022. It was the first playoff game of the Joe Burrow era, the Bengals ending the 31-year drought by defeating the Raiders at then Paul Brown Stadium. 9 yards of real estate will determine this playoff game. 4th down and goal from the 9. 17 seconds to go. The play clock at 3. Shotgun snap.
The city come alive. It's hard to put into words what it means to everybody in the city, and I'm just really happy to be a part of the team that was able to do it, and we got a lot more in store.
Carr throws into traffic. Intercepted. Jermaine Pratt has the football.
Yeah.
Coffin nails.
Bam, bam, bam. How about that?
Jermaine Pratt, and it's really all those guys, but Jermaine, I thought that was very fitting because he's been a guy who's been all about taking the ball away all season. And he got the one earlier in the season against Minnesota. He's done it multiple times. He's always a guy, when we watch the tape, he's trying to punch the ball out, rake it out, whatever he's got to do. So for him to get the pick on the last play of the game is really just fitting of what he's been all about.
There it is. Is that the best coffin nails? You guys perfectly timed the high five on the BAMs. I mean, it really felt like the best coffin nails you and Lap have done.
Outstanding cameo as well by our longtime statistician, Ben Jarvis, Brad Ellis, who was right in the middle of me and Lap there and was also in on the frantic high-fiving. So that was great.
I was going to ask if that is standard. Is the coffin nails always coinciding with the high fives?
I believe that's the only time that we have nailed the high fives at the exact moment of the bam, bam, bams.
Incredible. Well, let's start here, and I'll let you kick it off since this is your game. You chose this game. I mean, there's many. I mean, that entire playoff run, you could really, discuss which one was your favorite. And I think we did that at one point in the fan survey the next year, which was your favorite game of those in the Super Bowl run. But why was this one yours?
So I have to go back to the 2015 playoff loss to the Steelers, the infamous meltdown at Paul Brown. Elizabeth Blackburn and I tell the exact same story. Prior to this win over the Raiders, the happiest moment that I can ever remember in my life including my marriage and the birth of my son, Sam, was Vontaze Burfict's interception against the Steelers in that playoff game, because for 1 minute and 32 seconds, that was the real time amount of time between that interception and Jeremy Hill's fumble. We thought the drought was over. They had defeated the Steelers without their starting quarterback, Andy Dalton. They had this remarkable fourth quarter comeback, culminating in the touchdown pass from A.J. McCarron to A.J. Green. So in that moment, when Burfict intercepted that pass, total joy. And then 92 seconds later, total despair. And it kept getting worse with the penalty on Vontaze and the penalty on Adam Jones. So the victory over the Raiders in January of 2022 was absolute catharsis. That no longer mattered. All of the playoff failures of the Marvin era didn't matter anymore. We've got Burrow. This is the start of a new era. We don't have to worry about our quarterback coming up short in key moments. So for me, that's the game. I'm more thrilled by that moment than I was by the AFC Championship win a few weeks later over the Chiefs. As crazy as that sounds, that game was more impactful for me than having the chance to call a Super Bowl, which is something that very few announcers get to do, and obviously was a huge thrill in a different way. But for me, that game, that win at home, seeing the crowd that night in that moment remains at the top of the list.
You view it the same way, Mo?
Yeah. It's funny, rewatching it brought back a lot of emotion, because I think a lot of us tend to lump the 3 wins that month together, and the more recent ones stand out, and the feeling of them going to the Super Bowl. But just as a fan, the catharsis and the exorcism and the fact that I remember instantly thinking, Paul, you and I have joked about this. I no longer have to care about what the price of gas was in January of 1991.
$1.06.
Yeah. I get to do a show on a Monday after a Bengals playoff win, which I had done a bunch on the Monday after Bengals playoff losses. And it's so depressing. And with each subsequent one got more and more depressing. I was not at the game. I'm sure we'll talk about my experience with the woman we have dubbed Salad Lady, but it unleashed this like torrent of emotion. If you are a long suffering and even maybe not so long suffering Bengals fan, it was awesome to revisit and relive. And what I remember was thinking more than anything, like, this doesn't have to be it. Right? Because for years as Bengals fans, we had talked about win a playoff game. And what I remember in the immediate aftermath was like, you know what? The Titans might be the weakest 1 seed in recent history. If they end up going there, they can beat them, and then they just beat the Chiefs. Like, I remember instantly thinking, like, this doesn't have to be it. This doesn't have to end. And obviously it didn't. But yeah, unfortunately, as good as the NBC broadcast was, if you remember that Pittsburgh game, which we all do, when Burfict intercepts the pass, there are a billion crowd shots, and it's people enjoying the same thing Dan just talked about. I wish NBC would have done a little bit better job of capturing what was happening in the stands, but they did get Zach Taylor. If you go back after the Pratt interception, most football coaches in that moment are still looking grim. Zach has this look of ecstasy, just watching what's unfolding in front of him. And to me, that was the portrait of that victory, right? Because to me, it reflected what was happening with 65,000 people in the stands and God knows how many millions in Bengal country, so to speak.
Yeah, I'm curious if you guys kind of felt the same way, because watching this game is almost as if I was watching a video of my college years, whereas I don't remember that. I don't remember that. I don't remember that. It was all about the celebration and the ramifications and the curse. And like, I swear there was about 4 plays that I could have named off the top of my head from that game before I watched this. And then I was like, oh my God, that was huge. That was huge. There was just so much of that game. And it was only a few years ago. And there was just so much of that game that just kind of left my brain and went into the ether. And it was all so focused on spinning forward and the curse and not the actual plays that got him to that point.
I remember writing my column about this, and that was this was not about anybody on the field. Like Burrow and the players would have their moment. Like their time was to come. This night and that game, like, I mean, Burrow shows up in the post-game presser like he, just got back from a root canal. Like he's just, wasn't great. I mean, he's so matter of fact about it. When that game, everything that was amazing about it was what happened in the stands, what happened with the tension, what happened at MLTs, what happened everywhere outside of it, and that feeling for all the people that lived through Jeremy Hill, Kimo von Oelhoffen, Gus Verratt's left-handed pass, sat with a bag in their head in the 90s. That was like, to me, what the whole thing was about. So you're right, Jay, like going back and watching the game and trying to analyze the game was kind of silly because the game wasn't necessarily even that good. It was just kind of, there was a lot of mistakes. The Bengals played so much better that year and then through the playoffs, but everything else was special for us, for like the provincial nature of Cincinnati. It's special for people that know the story here. And that's what I think is so cool, and probably, Dan, why it stayed out to you too.
And one of the people who has a tremendous perspective on exactly what you just described is Kevin Huber, because I've talked to Kevin about this recently. He remembers standing on the field after the game as a lifelong Cincinnatian and McNicholas and UC grad and looking up into the crowd. And he says what he saw was just dumbfounded. Like, did this really happen? People staring off into space as if, holy crap, they actually won a playoff game. Nobody on the Bengals roster, maybe Sam Hubbard would be tied, but nobody could appreciate it more than Kevin Huber. And I think in his mind, that's the game that stands out from his incredibly long tenure as an NFL punter.
And I think on the TV broadcast, rewatching it, Mike Tirico does a really good job of giving the national audience context.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I in real time barely remember anything about the broadcast, but just rewatching it, Mike Tirico at the beginning and then as the game is unfolding does a really good job of sort of outlining, because I'm sure there were a lot of people who are like, big deal, it's an AFC wildcard game, like 5 other teams are going to advance this week. I think he does a really good job of sort of giving context to viewers who might not necessarily understand what we had gone through here. I think the other thing the game did, Jay, you talked about like rewatching it and not really remembering a lot of what happened. The game itself sort of foreshadows what the coming weeks are going to be like, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, they're going to be kind of uneven on offense. They're going to need really good special teams play, and they're going to need the play made at precisely the right time by somebody on defense. Now, the offensive line was a little bit better than it would be in the other 2 postseason wins, but it sort of was the blueprint that they ended up maybe not wanting to follow, but having to follow in order to get to LA.
I can't believe that team made the Super Bowl. You get it. I mean, they were just, it's so funny. We talk about this like past tense of it. It feels like long ago now because the bar is so different. I mean, it's been set at such a different standard now than that day. And you just look at that when they put the starting offensive line up there, you're just like, man, they've done a good job the last couple off seasons. Like, let's reflect on that for a second. And when you watch Max Crosby go one-on-one against Isaiah Prince, and you're just like, they found ways to win despite a lot of flaws on a young team that was early. You're right. That's the foreshadowing nature of they were a team that found ways through a lot of different aspects, and it wasn't because they were out talenting everyone necessarily.
Yeah, there was a lot of foreshadowing in little moments, big picture, yes, but little moments too. And the one thing that Mo said about Tirico doing such a good, it started at kickoff, 31 degrees, 31 years since a play, and he just kept weaving it in. And I had written that down too, that he did a fantastic job in that game.
Well, no surprise to his former college buddy here. I saw those traits in Mike Tirico when he was like 19 years old. Following up on what Mo mentioned, not only does Mike do a tremendous job of framing it and the importance of the win for Cincinnati and Bengals fans, but he didn't overdo it. That's the fine line.
Yeah.
He doesn't say every series, the Bengals haven't won a playoff game in 31 years. He drops it in about 4 times during the broadcast, but they're the perfect 4 times. He was so freaking good in this game. I know one of our categories we're going to talk about is the broadcast.
Yeah.
So I'll save that, Paul, for when you specifically want to bring it up. But Mike Tirico could not have been better on that telecast. He was so unbelievably good. I'll wait until the Olympics are over because I know he's got a lot on his mind right now, getting set to host that. But I will text him when the Olympics are finished just to tell him we did this podcast, and I'm sure we are all going to rave about his performance.
Yeah,
absolutely. I want to talk about next most memorable moment of this for you, and I'm going to start with mine because I want to play something first. And so here's where I want to start with mine. That right there is Zach Taylor. And what's he doing? Going to MLTs? I mean, now it's like, oh yeah, that's what happens. He gives that first time. I will never forget the first time I saw that he did that, being like, this is genius. And this dude just solidified himself as the absolute coach of the Bengals and the guy who's going to be the coach of this team for a long time. Because how do you do it? You connect yourself to this city. And he did that in the biggest way, not just by giving them this night, which is really, his ultimate flagpole, just planting that, but to then do it and add that on top of it. It's it was a legacy night for Zach Taylor. It's fitting, Mo, that you mentioned the shot of him at the end being because he is, to me, this is his night in a lot of ways. He was hired to do this. He was hired to break this stupid drought, to find a way to win a playoff game, do everything that Marvin Lewis couldn't do for all the good that Marvin did, and then to do it and then show up with Kevin Huber at MLTs and give the game ball and create this next unbelievable legacy, give it to the fans. Epic night for Zach, and that was, to me, the most memorable part of it.
The shot that Mo mentioned right after they showed Zach smiling and kind of celebrating within himself, he turns and he hugs Kevin Huber right after that. Yeah. And it wasn't just a, hey, good job hug. He said something. They had a conversation. And I wonder if it was, hey, we're taking game balls to a bar. If he told him right there in that moment, we're going to go do that.
Yeah. I remember that week, often saying, it doesn't feel like these guys are burdened by history, right? Because of all those other playoff games that we had all lived through, you had to bring up what that collective group hadn't done. You had to bring up, 1991 and the curse of Bo Jackson. And I remember often saying and thinking, like, these guys are very unburdened by history, but at the same time, Zach Taylor was willing to acknowledge, like, this is more than just advancing to the divisional round, and I remember talking about how, like, it feels like he's really in touch. It doesn't mean they're going to win the game, doesn't mean he's going to coach a great game, but I appreciated and still appreciate his willingness to acknowledge, like, all right, our goal, yes, is to do more than just win a playoff game, but we have to do that. And when we do, it's going to mean a lot to a lot of people. And I think him showing up at MLTs, easily, I'm sure at 39 years old, the oldest person in that bar.
He got carded.
Got carded. That's right. I thought was sort of a reflection of that. I think it was. I was thinking about those 3 playoff games and how it became like, well, where are they going to go? Where are they going to bring footballs to? Maybe they do that again this year if they win a bunch of playoff games. I'm not sure anything's going to replicate that moment. That it was so unexpected. It wasn't choreographed. They didn't announce it in advance. They didn't send an advance team, to my knowledge, to ML. They just showed up and did it. And that was really, really cool.
My wife is a very knowledgeable and passionate sports fan and football fan, but I don't think there's anything that the Bengals have ever done that has intrigued her or excited her more than that tradition of presenting the game ball after the playoff win. She always, I'll get home from these games. Do you know where they went? Where are they going with the ball? Can we go? So she's super excited about it. And as you know, I went to Syracuse and they have a similar tradition there. There's a pizza shop on campus called the Varsity where before the football season, they hang the banner of every opponent in order of the schedule. It hangs above kind of where you go in the food line. And then anytime they win a football game, they bring one of the stars of the game to this place. He gets up on a ladder and he hangs the banner upside down if they win, and it hangs upside down for the rest of the school year. So that's a tradition that Syracuse kids, love and remember forever. And this is a little bit different and a little bit cooler. And I'm sure other teams around the NFL are like, son of a bitch, I wish we would have thought of that first, because it's such a tremendous idea. It's only happened five times so far. I can't wait for it to happen again.
I will read off to you that video came from it was embedded in my story, maybe even yours too, Jay. But the tweet below it, I think, speaks to what Zach Taylor did that night. And this was Zach Taylor went to a local bar, was one of us for night after winning the Bengals, their first playoff game in 31 years. I will no longer accept slander on him. That's my effing coach. Hashtag That kind of sums it up, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Like, that's what Zach Taylor did that night, and sort of going from anonymous head coach that didn't really have much of a effect necessarily on people to being that's my effing coach. I think it obviously changed for him that night. Let's I'm gonna take a quick break to slip a break in here real quick, and then we're gonna come back and we're gonna dive a little bit more into some more specific categories here. All right, let's talk a little bit about what was written and said. Okay, well, Dan, I of course am gonna. We've heard your Jermaine Pratt call, but here is your call from the final play of taking the knee and the jubilation that occurred afterwards.
Joe Burrow takes the snap. He takes a knee. And after 31 years, the drought is over. And guess what? The Joe Burrow era is just beginning.
No doubt about it. And you talk about bend but don't break. The Bengals defense bent about as far as the defense can bend, but they did not break. Unbelievable football game. And I'll tell you, Dan, I got a tremendous amount of respect for this Las Vegas Raiders football team. These guys do not quit. They are physically and mentally tough. It was a tough out, and the Bengals advance, and hopefully everybody that get nicked up a little bit tonight, Dan, can lick their wounds.
Total jubilation and delirium in Cincinnati right now and all night as the Cincinnati Bengals are marching on to the second round of the playoffs after defeating the Las Vegas Raiders 26-19.
There's Dan. You're fine again. You and Lap in perfect dropping the over together. You've never been more in tune. I mean, just perfect combination.
Yeah, I think they still play us saying that in the montage of highlights that they run before the games at Paycor Stadium. So that's kind of amusing. Yeah, that brings chills, just remembering what it was like to be in the booth that night and, knowing that you weren't going to be sleeping for the rest of the night because you were so excited about the victory and the chance to look forward to another playoff game the next week. And I do think, after saying that the drought is over, the Joe Burrow is just getting underway. However I phrased it was also appropriate because, let's face it, during the Andy Dalton / Marvin Lewis era, there was always that, golly, he was terrible again feeling. And Joe Burrow plays his first playoff game, throws a touchdown pass on his first possession, matching the number of touchdown passes that Andy threw in 4 playoff games and 48 possessions on offense. The Bengals scored on the first 5 drives that they were trying to score in this playoff game. So anything that had happened before didn't matter anymore. It's like I've said before, the calendar used to be BC and AD. Now it's JB. We're getting ready for, year 5 JB. And Joe Burrow changed everything in the games leading up to that playoff victory. And then obviously by getting the job done that night.
Lat mentions the Raiders, right? And as the game is starting, I had forgotten one of the most bananas endings to a regular season ever, when we're all trying to figure out who are they playing, and the Chargers and Raiders are playing in that game, the Sunday night game, the last regular season game of the year that went until like 1:00 in the morning, where Brandon Staley calls a timeout when a tie gets his team to the postseason. So there was like this insane just end of the regular season, which obviously impacted who the Bengals were going to play. And then this Raiders team that in and of itself, and the NBC broadcast does a very good job covering this as well, what was a really interesting story, because they had the John Gruden situation, the just awful Henry Ruggs situation. And I remember walking away from that game amid all the emotion going, holy crap, that Raiders team deserves some credit with an interim coach, all the crap that they had endured, that collective group of players, how they got there, what they had to do at the end of the season. And Lap acknowledged that. And I think there's a lot of us who walked away from that game going, okay, maybe going into it, we thought this was going to be a cakewalk. That's the team we wanted the Bengals to play. But oh boy. And remember, they were awful. And they talk about this on the broadcast too. They were like historically bad in the red zone, and they kept getting red zone stops, which was really frustrating. But I had kind of forgotten until the game began and they reference how they got in. Like, oh yeah, that insane Sunday night, which if you're a social media follower, was one of those fun nights on Twitter where everybody's chiming in on this Raiders Chargers game, launched Bengals Raiders week. And it ended with an epic performance, an epic game, but a game that I think the Raiders earned a lot of our respect in.
6 walk-off wins that year for the Raiders. 6 of their wins happened on the final play of the game. And if not for Jermaine Pratt, it could have very easily been 7.
Yeah, they go for 2 there, I bet.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because this is the game that I want to play. Let's play the butterfly effect here. What if the opposite result happens? What were the stakes in retrospect for what the Bengals have now become? Let's say Pratt takes one step the wrong direction, or Jesse Bates doesn't come all the way across a couple plays earlier and break up that ball. And they do. And it's the latest meltdown. It's the latest. You've got to be freaking kidding me. A game they controlled and should have been up by a lot at halftime, considering the Raiders' miscues, particularly in that first half. Play out the scenario for me, I guess, Mo. I'll let you start. Like, what changes? What is the most significant thing that changes? Does it change the current arc? Are they still viewed the same way? They probably get there, I would assume, but it changes a lot.
Yeah, the 2 things that came to mind for me were, number one, we never hear the term Burrowhead because they don't go to Arrowhead Stadium and win. And Bengals Chiefs, for my money, is the best current rivalry in the NFL that's not based on geography or anything like that. We still have some of that, but we don't have it to the degree that we do now, because we would be minus a Bengals road win in Arrowhead Stadium. So I think that certainly changes without question. I also think, let's assume everything after 2021 plays out exactly the way it did. 22, they go 12-4. They make the AFC Championship game. 23 happens the way it did with the Burrow injury. I feel like I was listening to a radio show this week where they were talking about, Herbert, Burrow, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen. Like, all right, those guys, who's facing the most pressure? And someone made the point, like, well, you kind of remove Burrow from that group because he's been in a Super Bowl. Well, if he's not been to a Super Bowl by now, we're probably talking about him in at least slightly different terms. I think it would have created, you talk about it like a tense moment, right? Baltimore is driving in that wild card game the next year, and Hubbard, goes 98 yards and takes it to the house and they advance. Can you imagine the tension in the air in that game if the previous year they have melted down at home as favorites against an inferior opponent? I'm glad we didn't have to go down that road. But the first thing I thought was just Bengals Chiefs, which is so fun and is a must-watch game. It still is. It doesn't quite have the backstory that it does now because of the AFC Championship game they won.
Yeah, if I was thinking about, we would still maybe be writing about so many years without a playoff win. The opposite of what Mo said. If everything played out the same, I don't know that it would have. Maybe they don't win that game against Baltimore in the playoff, the wild card, the final year. Going away from the team thing, I think the one big thing, because Joe Burrow is still going to be Joe Burrow. He's still going to get a massive contract. You look at all the guys that contributed to that Super Bowl run. The one big thing, and it hasn't changed yet, but it's going to, was Evan McPherson's bank account, because he really, he became a folk hero with those walk-off win against Tennessee and predicting it, and then the walk-off against Kansas City. And he's still a good kicker, but he's not the legend in Cincinnati that he is right now without them winning that game against the Raiders and kind of setting the stage for all that other stuff.
Jay, I want to jump in quickly with something you briefly threw out there. You believe the Raiders would have gone for 2 if Carr had thrown a touchdown pass to pull them within 1.
I think so. It kind of, you don't?
No, I don't. I don't think there's enough precedent for NFL teams to do that. College teams do. NFL teams don't. It's happened a handful of times. I think they would have gone for the kick and tried to win an OT, but I find it interesting that you think they would have gone for it.
So during that entire last drive, I remember thinking they're going to score. Will they go for 2? How much time will be left? And can we get McPherson in position to make a 60-yarder to win? And my take at the time was, all right, you're the Raiders. You're not supposed to be there. You're underdogs. Do you really want to willingly give the ball back to Joe Burrow? You're an interim coach. You're probably not going to keep the gig. Go on the road and win the game with your offense. So I remember playing it out in real time, because the Cincinnati fan in me is like, all right, they're going to give up a score. This is how my life works. So are the Raiders going to go for 2? And if they do, is there going to be time left? And then in my head, as I'm watching the game by myself, I'm like, if I'm Rich Bisaccia, I'm going for 2 here. I'm the underdog on the road. I've just stunned this team on its own field. I've put their defense on its heels. Let's get to the line of scrimmage and run a play and see if we can take the lead and avoid overtime and avoid putting ourselves at the mercy of the coin flip and avoid giving the ball back to Joe Burrow with the game tied, where he can go down the field and beat us. I think it would have been fascinating to see what they would have done. But I remember actively, once Kevin Huber punted it away, going, all right, Raiders are going to score. Should they go for 2? And if they do, is there going to be any time left for the Bengals to pull off a miracle?
I feel like that, I wonder a lot of what would have happened in maybe an overtime there, because the Bengals won those types of games all year, right? They
So did the Raiders.
So did the Raiders.
Yeah.
But, that it felt like that was the types of game. But I just felt like I remember it's just the fact of here. I can't believe this is happening, right? Because I can't believe this is happening again. That 3rd and 17 to Waller, and you're saying that was the moment you said, "Oh my God, it's happening again." There's no way. It's supposed to be different. It's happening again. They have no business losing this game, and then you get the plays. Overlooked that I had. Jay, you mentioned hardly remembering a lot of plays. Sam Hubbard's deflection with his helmet, jumping in the air. Waller is wide. That is 6. It is 6. But Hubbard jumps and his helmet deflects the ball. He probably doesn't get that deflection today. I don't know if he can still get that extra inch. That is just those types of plays. If that doesn't happen, it's remarkable to think how close it really did end up being. All things considered. Here's though the play that night. I want to kind of take a look back at maybe some of the critical sequences, or maybe some revisionist history as we forget some things that happened. There was one that stood out to me that was the moment that I said they're going to win this, and this was it.
Carr stomps the right foot, catches a chest-high snap, drops back 7 steps, hit from behind. The ball comes out, scooped up by Ogunjobi. Hendrickson with the strip sack, and the Bengals will take over at the 15 of Las Vegas.
And maybe that was a little too early for me to feel that way, but you just felt like the Bengals should come out and they should be able to create turnovers and disrupt and take, and their defense had been able to set that tone a lot. And I thought with that play really said, they had coming off the touchdown, they got the turnover, they're about to go up. They got it rolling. This is how they have felt lately. And when that happened, it felt like they're just going to play loose and free. There's not going to be any playoff jitters for a young team. And they were absolutely, even though they only got a field goal off of it, it still felt like they had really rattled the cage of the Raiders at that point. And I felt like they were going to win. And maybe the only time I doubted it was that Darren Waller 30-17 after that. But yeah, that to me was a massive moment that probably gets lost in a lot from that night.
And Larry Ogunjobi's final moment as a Bengal.
Yeah.
Which was my first thought rewatching it.
Yeah.
I mean, no knock on Larry. He got hurt in the game, right? I mean, he was obviously a terrific addition, but he would later on get hurt in the game, never play for him again. So
how about the fact that play is set up by their ridiculous, let's insert Marcus Mariota and cause a false start to make 3rd and long. And then they got a tight end trying to block Trey Hendrickson. Derek Carr's patting the ball like he's got Anthony Munoz on his blind side. And it was just so much bad in that play by the Raiders. And, Hendrickson obviously does what he does there. But that was a moment where I was like, what are the Raiders doing? What is happening here?
There was another, because this was the segment, was the forgotten critical sequence. And it was a huge play that I had forgotten about. And it kind of ties into what we were talking about before with foreshadowing. And that was Josh Jacobs running down the right sideline. He's going for a touchdown, and Mike Hilton chases him down from behind and tackles him. And the Bengals end up forcing a field goal instead of giving up a touchdown. And if you remember, the following week, he chased down Deontay Foreman that was a 35-yard run. He chased down Deontay Foreman of the Titans on a 45-yard run, saved a touchdown. Next play intercepts the pass. So that hustle play from Hilton I thought that was a really big swing right there, because it would have been 13-10. Instead, they kept it 13-6. And then right after that, the Bengals go down, get the Burrow whistle touchdown, and it's 20-6.
Also foreshadowing Jesse Bates a year later, right? Getting a push out of bounds right before the Hubbard yard dash happens. Which, by the way, Tirico with a quick drop. Sam Hubbard, the kid from Cincinnati, the first time he sees it, and I'm like, already an early drop. The next year, was on top and mentioned it twice in this game.
He did. And on Sam Hubbard's first tackle of the game, Mike referred to him as the Cincinnati kid.
Yes.
So when he does it on the fumble in the jungle, it's not original. We've been giving him too much credit.
I thought the same thing. I thought he did that in the moment the fumble in the jungle, and I was like, I was disappointed to hear that first reference.
Yeah, it was great both times.
Yeah,
and I thought Mike was great during the game, but he really emphasized Sam's ties to the city at appropriate moments, which I thought was great.
You mentioned Jesse Bates. When they announce, they show the graphics of the players who are starting. And with every player, they have their Pro Football Focus grade. And Jesse Bates, 79th out of 94 safeties in the NFL. And it illustrates that was a very, by his standards, poor season. But then he makes that play right before the Jermaine Pratt pick. I think 2 on the second down play. 2 plays before deflects a pass. And that postseason was sort of the resurgence of Jesse Bates. And he would go on to make, you might argue far bigger plays in the next couple of games, but that was a big storyline to the entire season, right? Like, God, Jesse Bates, they couldn't get a deal done. He's not the player that he was. And then in the postseason, there's a reawakening, and it didn't start with that play necessarily late in the fourth quarter, but it certainly was a huge one in that game. And And, then Jesse would go on to have a killer postseason, and the rest is history.
Yeah, I thought the pass breakup on the Hunter Renfrow play ends up being really huge. I mean, that's points off the board right there on that third down play. And another, I remember writing down, he might have been the underrated player of the game here. And it's just for a couple of huge plays that he made. Yeah, you're right. And it was a big year for him. All right, let's talk about the inadvertent whistle. Okay. So, I think outside of Raiders faithful, dudes wearing, the shoulder pads with the stick, they're all decked out in black and silver. Outside of them, I don't know how many people remember the inadvertent whistle that well. How much of effect do we really think? Because that was a bad call, right? The whistle blows before he catches it, and they claimed that it didn't. They blew it. They had no way to review it. Bengals touchdown. How big of an impact do we really think this has? I understand Raiders fans being mad, but legitimately, how much impact do we think this had on the game?
Zero.
Well, the whistle itself did not affect the play, no matter what was said on the telecast, because at one point they show one defensive back and kind of imply, well, maybe he pulled up a little bit. It was a split second before the ball arrived in Boyd's hands, so it did not affect anybody on the field. Having said that, they did not enforce the rule.
Right.
The Bengals got lucky. The rule says if there is an inadvertent whistle while the ball is in play, the play doesn't count. Period. End of story. So by the definition of the rule, the Bengals got very lucky. The play should have been redone. It should have been 3rd and 4 all over again. If they don't get a touchdown, wind up losing the game, we're talking about it forever. It's kind of a split. It didn't really affect the play. Therefore, maybe they enforced it right. But by the letter of the law, the Bengals were extremely fortunate.
Yeah, I want to give credit to the crowd for, how loud they were. And maybe that's the reason that because they couldn't review the whistle, whether it was blown or not. But the fact that they didn't hear it in the moment is surprising. But it wasn't that loud. The Bengals were on offense, and there's not a roar as Joe Burrow's rolling toward the sideline. So I do think they got lucky in that regard because they didn't enforce it correctly. But the whole officiating that whole game was a mess. That was, it was like the 2-minute delay to decide that, there's 2 flags on the play and they're talking it over. And then after 2 minutes, they say, oh, they called timeout before it. So none of this even matters. And it's like, how does it take 2 minutes to figure out the timeout was called? And there were 14 penalties. It was just, it was not Jerome Boger's best game.
They ruined the entire second half.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And each of those 14 penalties required a discussion.
Yes.
I mean, they could not make a single call in that game without a conference.
And this, I have said this, the biggest thing that blows my mind in playoff football is all-star crews. I have never understood it. I don't understand why they do it. Communication between these guys is the key to the game moving efficiently and predicting what other guys are going to do. And the fact that you would just throw people together and expect them to know how to play together or talk to each other was asinine. And it showed up in a big way here in this one. I'm mostly mad about the inadvertent whistle for one reason. As the pool reporter, I had to talk to Walt Anderson while the Zach Taylor press conference was going on. I'm in the hallway outside of the press conference room, and there's mascots and cheerleaders and total chaos everywhere, people running like it's just madness. And I'm trying to talk to Walt Anderson about whatever happened. I see Zach Taylor going in to do the press conference about a story that I've been waiting my career to write. And I got to sit here and be like, so they really saying that the whistle was after and try to get a real answer. I am mostly mad about that because I always think about how I had to miss half of that press conference and worry about all of that, the entire beginning portion of the postgame.
Also, it was a great play by Joe Burrow.
Yeah.
It's a terrific play by Joe Burrow. And the thing that stood out to me was it's not like the Raiders go nuts about it, right? They show Bisaccia just standing there like wondering, where am I going to be working next year? Like I'm not sure they knew there was an inadvertent whistle. So I think to a degree, I certainly remember talking about it and reading about it after the fact. And I found an article during watching the replay that, pointed out this is an embarrassment for the league. It's like, all right, well, step back, buddy. But I remember thinking like, this is maybe amplified if the Raiders go nuts, and they didn't. I don't remember them complaining about it after the game. And even in the game, I'm sure things were said, but it wasn't like there was this big demonstrative display of anger by anybody on their sideline.
The broadcast didn't even mention it. I mean, it finished. They went to commercial. It might have been the second commercial after the touchdown before they came back and said, oh, by the way, this happened. And they talked to Terry McAuliffe about it. And it just went totally unnoticed. When you watch it live in the moment, you clearly hear the whistle.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that nobody else really brought it up until several minutes later was surprising.
I think that was the producers being like, the internet is talking about this a lot, and they're right. And so we need to make sure that we reference that. But I think you're right. In the moment, it was just kind of like, oh, that sounded weird. But Dan, you can speak to this. I mean, when you're in the booth, that type of noise doesn't always necessarily register when you're doing the play call and going through it that way, right?
Yeah. I mean, you're not, as a radio broadcaster, you're not even listening to replays. We've got a monitor in our booth so we can see video of replays, but we don't hear the audio. So I didn't hear that whistle in real time calling the game. And I remember on our broadcast, we didn't bring it up until halftime, when we check social media and see that all these people are talking about it. Now we get an update. All right, here's what that controversy was about, and we can talk about it. So, that was my experience for that play. But Paul, I want to talk to you about the process of being the pool reporter in that situation, because when I realized that was the case, I texted you about it yesterday. How does that work? Do you get word during the game? All right, where you're going to be allowed to talk to the officials. I didn't know if you walked into the officials' room, if you got on the phone with New York.
I can't look Jerome Boger in the eyes, Dan.
Yeah. So you're given a phone, or they give you a number to call? How exactly does it work?
Basically you can request a pool report. At the time I was PFWA president or whatever, local chapter. And so I remember going down at halftime and talking with the Raiders writers and saying, hey, are you guys interested in this? I can, do it as the home team PFWA person. You can request this and do it. And like they were. And so, and I was too. So, okay. So you just put an official request through the team for a pool report. And I think on the broadcast, you hear them talk about, they're going to make a statement after the game, which was going to be through the pool report. And so once I had requested that, they decided to go that route with addressing it. And so then we will call you. They have your phone number. They will call you in the moments after the game. So you just have to be ready, which is why I say they ruined it for me, because you're sitting there the whole time, having to worry about this call coming in when you're trying. I mean, I could be in the elevator, I could be going down, I could be in the press conference. And so it's a total kind of a mess, because it has to be through the New York. At that point, that one was a New York call. I mean, we couldn't even be, because we were still in these modified COVID rules. I couldn't even talk to him in person if I wanted to. That's never been the way that it goes. So pool reporter is a mess. The last thing you ever want on your plate is a pool report. It's always like, oh no, this is going to be a pool report.
Well, you did a great job. I went back and read the transcript. You got all the, important questions asked, but it was interesting to me, and I wanted to get your feedback on this. One of the questions that you asked was, did the whistle happen before the ball was caught, or something to that effect? And the league says, no, in the rules of in the opinion of the guys on the field, it happened after the catch. And you repeated the question because you knew it was BS. And they were just covering themselves. You're like, no, you're saying that it was after the catch? Yes. Yes, saying it was after the catch, which is basically their way of saying, no, it wasn't, but we don't want this to go on.
We have to say it. That's the wording from them is it was basically, that's what they ruled on the field, essentially. Like, they just had to keep repeating that's how they viewed it. Right. That's how they viewed it. you know, because I'm not talking to Boger, and Boger couldn't be like, yeah, botched that one, you know.
But important to remember, it's not a reviewable play, so they couldn't go back and fix that with replay. That falls under the heading of things that cannot be changed on replay review.
Yeah, so fun experience there. Let's slip in another quick break, and we're going to talk about, we've got a few more things we want to tick through here. All right. So I want to start. We got a few categories we want to run through quickly here. Some of the fun stuff from this game and the fallout and what have you. But before we do that, I want to just open the floor to talking about Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow's first playoff game. He comes out. He's fine. Like, if you just took this game out of context in a vacuum, standard Burrow game, right? 244, a couple of touchdowns. Didn't do a ton. They didn't even really ask him to do a ton outside of, hey, let Jamar Chase own everyone across from him was kind of the game plan. And it was more than enough. And then afterwards, we get this from Joe Burrow in the post game.
What does it mean to you to get a playoff win in your first playoff start?
I mean, it's exciting, but this was expected. This isn't like the icing on top of the cake or anything. This is the cake, and so we're moving on.
What does it mean to you to be the youngest quarterback in franchise history to win a playoff game?
It's exciting, but we have a great team and great coaching staff. And like I said, we're on to the next week. It's going to be fun tomorrow to watch the games, knowing we have the win. I was glad we were the first game so we could get it out of the way and watch these games and watch the film tomorrow and get back to work.
What's that final drive like for you, where you're just an observer and you're watching the defense? It's out of your hands. Was it difficult?
Yeah, it's tough. I was kind of hoping they would just go down and score so I could get it back. But I'm glad the defense made a play.
I mean, can you have less energy after your first playoff win in a 31-year drive? I counted like 4.5 shrugs. Yeah. I mean, it's just he's wearing the Cartier shades and just the most relaxed. It was another seed or another flower in the Joe Burrow cool factor. It was just, ho hum. Guess what I just did?
Perfect.
Ended the drought.
Absolutely. And Paul, think about this. You more or less referred to his performance as good, not great, but good, got the job done. He had a passer rating of 110, took care of the ball. There were nothing even close to an interception, scored on the first 5 freaking possessions that they had the ball. Now they stalled in the red zone a few times, but so what? They're getting points every time. I hate to bash on Andy, but it's impossible not to compare the two in the postseason. The Bengals never scored more than 10 points on offense in the 4 playoff games that Andy played. That's how many, the Bengals had in 2 possessions of the Joe Burrow era, and 26 points in the game. So if a passer rating of 110 in a postseason game is okay, he did pretty well, that shows you who we have at quarterback.
Well, he was coming off setting the record for back-to-back games with the most yards. You had just seen him go Chiefs, Ravens, and it's like, well, if he doesn't throw for 450, then what does it matter, right? And it kind of you were kind of viewing him that way, and the way that they were rolling at that point.
I think if I had a dollar for every time I heard an analyst refer to his performance in the immediate aftermath as businesslike, I'd have a summer home somewhere. I mean, it was, but I remember we played that audio the following Monday and we said, all right, is this Joe talking about his performance after a brief appearance in a preseason game, or after he just helped deliver the first postseason victory in franchise history for 3 decades? That is typical of the Joe Burrow experience, right? Now, I'll be honest with you, in real time, I didn't want to hear that. Like I wanted Joe to be behaving the way I was, but I guess they didn't have enough alcohol in the locker room for him to consume. So that's what you get.
That's why they win the next week. I mean, they win the next week and the week after that because Joe is not on cloud 9 after winning the first wild card round. He's big picture and the team follows his lead. So that's why I was so excited by that meh reaction after a playoff win, because it just spoke to, that's not what this guy's about. This guy's about getting by and
Yeah,
I'll say, go ahead, Jay.
well, I was gonna say, because his attitude went throughout because the clip you showed, the social clip before, Sam Hubbard was kind of taking that same approach where we've got more to do, and they all followed his lead. And I keep going back to this, but there was so much foreshadowing in that game. And with the question I asked him about sitting there watching that final drive, he said, I just want him to score so I could get the ball back and we could go down. And the next 2 weeks he did it. He got the ball back and they went down, they scored to beat Tennessee. And then they got the ball back in overtime and he went down and they scored against Kansas City in the AFC Championship game. And yeah, those were field goals. They weren't touchdowns, but it was just there were so many things in this game that were foreshadowing. And that was just another one.
And also they took some heat, maybe not from anybody here, but they took some heat for how they handled themselves after they destroyed the Baltimore Ravens. Right? In that regular season game where Joe throws for 520, they took some heat for, he torched a secondary that's, a bunch of dudes who aren't really NFL players. And so the contrast, and I had no issue, they broke out cigars and went crazy when they beat the Kansas City Chiefs. And there were people, I remember taking phone calls from folks who were like, God, these guys are full of themselves. They really haven't accomplished anything. So there really actually was a pretty stark contrast between what you just played, what you just heard from Joe Burrow, and maybe some of the things that you heard from the locker room after they beat Baltimore and after they beat Kansas City. I had no issue with either. From my take was smoke your cigars. That's my take in life. But have a blast. You just torched the Ravens, you beat the Chiefs, do what you got to do. But it was in real time. It was sort of striking how more muted the post-game reaction was after the Raiders win in the postseason compared to some of those late season wins over Baltimore and Kansas City.
Let's go through some broadcast stuff. So there's a lot here. I have a lot of notes. I'll open it up to you guys to kick it off though. Dan, what do you got? What do you got from the broadcast?
I've got a lot. So we might double the length of this podcast so far by talking about the broadcast. Tirico sensational, as we said earlier. But why did this game end Drew Brees' broadcasting career?
Thank you.
He was lampooned after this game. And obviously I didn't see the telecast because I was broadcasting the game on the radio. And looking back, I think he was actually pretty good.
Yeah.
Really? Now, he didn't wrap up his point succinctly enough. So he stepped on the beginning of some plays. He stated the obvious a few times, which most announcers do. There are only so many Collinsworths out there that say something interesting after every snap, but he wasn't that bad. And NBC put him in a tough spot. He had done Notre Dame games as a color analyst. Other than that, he was doing the studio show that year. But since NBC had a couple of first-round playoff games, Al Michaels and Collinsworth the next night, Tirico with somebody for the Bengals-Raiders game, they gave him Drew Brees. They had worked together on the Notre Dame games, and I didn't think it was that bad of a performance. Drew Brees should still be doing NFL color commentary right now.
Yeah, I wrote that down. I wrote that down because I don't remember much about the broadcast, having watched the game in real time. But I do remember that Drew Brees took a beating from people. And I wrote down, okay, Brees isn't Collinsworth. Yeah. Who is, right? Legitimately, who is? I thought he was fine. I thought he was good with the telestrator. There were a couple of times where he talked a little bit too much or really couldn't punctuate his thought. But I watched that the other night thinking for his first go at it in a game of that magnitude, he was fine. Yes. There was something to build on there. I prepared it. It was funny. Dan, you can speak to this more than anyone, obviously. At the beginning of the game, the play-by-play guy is setting the scene and introducing guys and filling the backstories, and here we go. And then, the analyst usually lays out for a while, even over a couple of plays. And so this happens in this game, and it's a little longer than usual. And I remember going God, Brees is going to talk at some point and it's going to suck, because that's all I had heard. And then he starts talking and it's he's prepared. You know, it wasn't like you watched it and thought like he has no idea what these two teams do or what their strengths are. He didn't do his prep work. He obviously did. He's obviously green, but relative to everything that was written and said about his performance afterward, I thought he was okay.
You know, I was watching it.
Tirico deserves a lot of credit for that, though, right? I mean, Tirico is pulling him through a lot of it. I think because he's that good. You're not that there's somebody that would be terrible to go do, but I think being next to Tirico makes it a little bit easier. There were a number of times where like, oh, he's perfectly setting him up. Like, Drew, you need to talk about this here, and it would ask him a question about what's a quarterback thinking here, stuff like that. And I felt like having Tirico was the gift for him because I thought he really helped pull Drew along there. Sorry, there, Jay.
No, that's fine. So the YouTube version of this game that I watch, it doesn't show the setup where it's the two of them in the booth with the stadium. So it was like halfway through the second quarter. I'm like, who is this analyst? I didn't know who it was. And I was like, normally when you're watching these playoff games, you know the voices and the crews. And I had to go get the game notes that the team puts out ahead of the game to see who and I was like, oh, it's Drew Brees. I was like, I would think he would be better as a quarterback, but then realizing he was new and fresh too. So that surprised me. And he was good when Tirico teed him up on the one thing where the play you were talking, the Ogunjobi sack, where getting lined up on a tight end. And he said, is that because of the protection disguise? And he said, no, you would never block Hendrickson one-on-one with a tight end. And the most amusing that I found, though, was he tried to tee him up again. I think this was in the second half. And he's talking about Eli Apple. And he says, a former teammate of yours, Drew. And Eli is hated in New Orleans. And I think he's hated by a lot of ex-teammates. And Drew just totally passes. He just talks about Eli's trajectory in 2021 of going from non-starter to starter. I really wanted him to say something about Eli there, but it was probably best that he held his tongue.
Getting back to Tirico teeing up Drew Brees, that's something as a play-by-play announcer that you will do with a green analyst, because you want to make sure that you are pointing out their expertise. You want them to shine. You're trying to help them to shine. But for some analysts, that's tough. They are thinking whatever they are thinking as the game is going on. They're getting ready to make their point. Now you ask them this question, and for some guys, it takes a while to handle that. So I do think that was one of those situations where Mike was doing the right thing, but it wasn't necessarily easy for Drew Brees at the snap of a finger to suddenly change his train of thought and succinctly answer that question in real time with the game going on.
I have a thought on Catherine Tappan. Okay. And that was they throw to her at the Open. Okay. And now, Mo, we've talked about this, the cost of milk, right? Like it is trope. We have heard this. We've heard every version of this over the course of 30 some years. And she's had all week. I'm sure she's wonderful. This is just this particular moment. She's had all week to come up with her things from 1991. Right. And it's Seinfeld's on TV. Cell phones were bricks. No text. There's 4 players alive. You can do so much better than Seinfeld ran through the late 90s.
I still watch 3 episodes a week now.
No, I mean, look, Cheers? Yeah, Cheers. You couldn't go Cheers? It's a great place to go. They're still on. There was no internet really at that point. We're still years away from Bryant Gumbel asking what the internet is. We haven't even gotten to that point yet. Janet Jackson and Madonna were duking it out for the #1 single at the time. There's so many good places you go. I thought it was a ball drop right off the top on the tropiest trope that happens in this game. And I was just really disappointed.
I took it as her just
research of 1991.
I just took it as her trying to come up with new things because we had beaten to death the #1 song in the country and the price of gas and what milk costs and who the president was. And so I kind of felt bad for her because she had to make the same point that has been made before every Bengals postseason game for years. And so I gave her a pass. I thought the worst broadcast moment was what the worst broadcast moment is for most NBC games, which is right before halftime when they go to the studio. And here's what's coming up at halftime. And it's Maria Taylor, who's excellent, but then it's Chris Sims and Tony Dungy. And like whoever writes lines like Joe Burrow looks like Joe Cool. I mean, like, if I'm Drew Brees and I'm taking all this crap for my performance, and I'm like, yeah, but I'm not the guy who said that. Okay. Like, that's now it's Jason Garrett. It's been a few different iterations of that bunch. That is always the most cringeworthy portion of any NBC broadcast. And as soon as they cut, because it's obviously been months since we've watched an NBC Sunday Night Football broadcast, as soon as they cut to it watching this game, I'm like, oh, what's Chris Sims got for me here? And he didn't fail to disappoint.
I want to get back to Catherine Tappan at the beginning, trying to frame how long it's been with pop culture references. I tried to think for myself, all right, hers weren't very good. What would be better? What would I go with right now if I was trying to frame for the audience how long it's been? I came up with this. Pro Bowlers at the time. The last time the Bengals, as of then, had won a playoff game. Are you ready for some of the Pro Bowlers from January of 91? How about Bo Jackson, Joe Montana, Lawrence Taylor, Reggie White? These were the Pro Bowlers at the time, the last time the Bengals won a playoff game. I think that would have been pretty good.
Yep. You were ready for that job. You could have done it.
I'm ready.
Jay, do you have stats or trivia for me?
Okay, I do. You guys were talking about Jamar and the game he had. It was pretty remarkable. I looked these up. He was only the 13th player in NFL history to have at least 9 catches and 100 yards in his first career playoff game. If you bump that up to 9 and 116, what he actually had, he was just the 8th player in NFL history to do it, and he was the first rookie to ever do it. Yeah, even though it's first career playoff game, it was his first career playoff game as rookie. First guy to ever do it. Puka Nacua matched him last year, but it was the first time to happen. And then what we talked about, where they scored on their first 5 possessions. They only scored 6 points in the second half. The Bengals had lost 10 consecutive games and 26 of 28 when they failed to score a second half touchdown, and they overcame that mainly because of the Pratt pick. But 26 of 28 when not scoring a second half touchdown, they had lost, and they found a way to win one of the biggest games in franchise history.
Wow. You've always got something, and I appreciate that. 10 in a row. Okay. Let's go most Cincinnati thing about this game. I have a good one here. This became one of my favorite random things about the Bengals playoff run there, and that was the overwhelming presence of Ickey Woods.
Yeah.
He's just like, Ickey came out of the woodwork. Anybody's been around Cincinnati, like, Ickey's around, right? He's always shows up at these events, and he's still the biggest personality in the room. But Ickey just became the face of, like, the Bengals old represented. And Jay, you remember, I could not get enough of the bee in the bag.
Yes.
He has the chain with the bee, and he kept it in the bag throughout the playoffs.
Yeah.
He's handing the trophy over at Arrowhead with the bee in the bag around his neck. And I just could not get enough of Ickey's presence as the ruler of the jungle, gives a shuffle. And I'm just like, this is the most Cincinnati thing ever. Of course, it's just littered with Ickey, because he just he always finds his way in there, and it's just amazing. It's just amazing to me. What a shuffle.
I had 2 thoughts on the Ickey that first of all, I want to have a database of rulers of the jungle, because I was like, oh, I'd forgotten he was the ruler of the jungle that night. And then second, maybe one of the greatest understated touchdown celebrations in Bengals history. CJ Uzomah scores the first touchdown. He goes Ickey shuffle into gritty, which just perfectly sums the 91 to 220 to 20,021, that bridge. And I thought that was tremendous.
I also want to note that when they showed Ickey doing the shuffle as the ruler of the jungle, Tirico's line was, he's got one shuffle left in him. Ickey's been able to do a few more since. God love him, because anytime he has a public appearance, somebody's going to ask him to do it, and he's gracious and does.
Well, you might have to pay
he
him.
does not always do it.
Oh, really?
Dan, have you heard the story about when he refused to shuffle for us on Beyond the Stripes?
No.
Oh.
Yeah, we had him on as a guest back in our Beyond the Stripes days when I was at the Inquirer, and it was when the deli meat thing was going on.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had a dumb gag where we had gotten a tray of deli meat, and we had a bunch of fans come up, and they gave their impressions of the Icky Shuffle holding turkey rolls, and were slamming the turkey rolls down as footballs. It was a whole thing with the thought of we paid players, we paid Icky, I thought, and so we went, and everybody does it. And to wrap the show, the music's about ready to play. So Icky, how about you get up and give us one? And he said, "Woo, just can't do it." That was what he said. And you can hear me on air. I go, "Did the check clear?" I thought Icky is supposed to, like, we paid him, right? Isn't he supposed to shuffle? Apparently whatever it wasn't enough. And he refused to do a shuffle for us. I think he was feeling himself back in the days of the heyday of that commercial.
I wonder if it was Geico related. I wonder if Geico had a deal with him at that time that, you know what, you're doing this for us, but you can't just do it for everybody else. It's possible. Things like that are out there.
Yeah, you're right. No, much love for Icky.
And then Icky would go on to be, if you win the conference championship, there's always a former player who's there on stage, and it was Icky.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, Icky was
was.
all over the place.
He was. It was unbelievable.
In that run, yeah.
Did Icky popularize the giant logo chain? I'm not sure that I had seen the giant logo chain pre-Icky. My son immediately had to have one.
Is it still in a bag?
After Icky started the rage. So, I hope he got a cut, because I think Icky helped make that giant B logo chain popular.
I think I was later told that he kept the bag because he kept pictures of himself in there to, like, sign for people or something like that. Or if people wanted autographs, he kept pictures of himself or something like that. But there was a reason to it, but I don't care. I love the bag more than anything. I hope it never goes away. Let's see here. Let's go Graders worthy, Jay. And Dan, I would say, Dan, you kicked off our My Favorite Game series. You have crushed it here for we're over an hour, but you don't get any more graders. You're already the voice of graders. You have every graders hookup that's needed. We're not going to give you any graders. I have an idea, Jay, unless you have one that you feel like is particularly deserving. I have a little bit of an idea.
No, I do like your idea, and I think this is going to test the power of the reach of this podcast. Can we find this guy?
Yeah, I think we need to, because here's the thing. When Mo, you mentioned earlier, there's a cutaway right after the play to the Pratt pick of a guy, and the guy is he's in some sort of blue starred jumpsuit.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's now one of the most famous replays in Bengals history. And there's this random guy in blue who, to me, became the face of ecstatic bewilderment of just, I cannot believe it's happening. I don't know why I'm wearing blue, but I am. And it draws your eye to this person. And to me, it always goes right from Zach Taylor to that guy. I don't know who that guy is, but I love his face. And I always think about, man, what a choice. Who knew the blue would pay off for this guy at this level when he showed up that night? And it did. And I always think of him as that was kind of the face of all Bengals fans, the one little cutaway. So if you're that guy and you listen, or you know this guy, and you listen to the podcast, reach out to us.
Wearing
hit
the
us
suit.
up on
Wearing
Twitter.
the suit, yes.
Wearing the suit.
Yeah, we need a picture of you wearing the suit, and we will send you Graders 6-pack at your door. Cool as could be, delicious on a hot summer day. We just need to hear from you. So if you know that guy and he can get a picture of us wearing the suit, we want to know who you were, because thank you for being the perfect face of ecstatic bewilderment amongst Bengals fans. I love that. I always think of him on that shot.
It does make no sense. It's like a USA suit. He does have a Bengals. He has like a Bengals hunting hat on,
Yeah.
But
Yes.
yeah, I don't know what the blue was about. Maybe
Yeah, it was a
maybe he
little-
did that to get on TV. He's in the front row behind the end zone. I've done that before at baseball games, wore a tie-dye shirt or something where you think you'll be easily recognizable on the TV cameras. So maybe that's what he had in mind.
A little bit
See,
of an
Jay,
evil
usually you're
Knievel
trying to be
vibe.
not recognizable while you sneak down to the front row. I'm actually surprised you've ever done anything where you're like, I want to make sure I stand out. I always assume that you're trying to just walk confidently and blend in is kind of your main objective anytime going to a public event.
Well, when you actually this was back in the day when you actually bought the seats and sat down low, or you go to a game where there's no crowd at all and you know you're just going to walk down there and they're not going to care.
All right, let's flip it forward here and wrap this thing up. Anything else you want to get off your chest before we go to MVP and winner of the night?
Well, there's a category here that you had mentioned when you emailed all of us, our hot take.
Yes.
From this game. And I've got one. My hot take is that Frank Pollock does not get enough credit for the Bengals' 2 postseason runs. Mo referred to Jesse Bates' PFF rating that they showed on the screen early in the telecast when they were going through the lineup. Here is what the PFF ratings were for 3 of the 5 starting offensive linemen in that game. Trey Hopkins, 35th of 37 centers. Hakeem Adeniji, who started at right guard, 38th of 41 right guards. Isaiah Prince, who started at right tackle, 43rd of 44 tackles or right tackles. Quentin Spain, who is the starting left guard, never played another NFL game after the Super Bowl that year. And the Bengals won 3 playoff games with that offensive line. The next year, we remember they beat the Bills in Buffalo with an offensive line that included 3 backups. Jackson Carman at left tackle, Max Sharping at right guard, Hakeem Adeniji at right tackle. They also had a rookie, Cordell Volson, at the time at left guard. It seems to me more people tend to be down on Frank Pollock for whatever reason. Jackson Carman didn't pan out the way they hoped. Whatever offensive line issue you might bring up, the fact that they got to a Super Bowl and an AFC championship game with the state of their offensive lines in those 2 seasons, Frank Pollock did one hell of a job. That is my hot take.
I've often talked about, and I make it about the coaching staff, what it had to be like to prepare to play high stakes games where you know you have to game plan around that deficiency. I don't think, and if you want to start with Frank Pollock, awesome, but I don't think the staff as a whole gets credit for making the offense function. They weren't great. They scored 5 touchdowns and 3 postseason wins. But allowing the offense to at least function when you have to sit down to game plan against a playoff team, knowing our offensive line has what it has, is something that to this day doesn't get talked about enough.
That offensive line is so bad.
Yeah.
I mean, it shouldn't have been good enough. In no world should it have been good enough.
7 pressures for Max Crosby in that game, but only 1 sack. I mean, it was amazing. But what I'd written, it's not a hot take, it's something I had written down just for this part of it, was if this game doesn't perfectly sum up DJ Reader's career, then I don't know what does. I mean, he just, I don't know if they barely mention him on the broadcast, and that's kind of the way he just toils in anonymity anyhow. He drew 2 holding penalties in this game while being double teamed. And they were huge. They were 2nd and 5s that turned into 2nd and 15s and stalled drives. And they lost Ogunjobi in the game, and they lost Mike Daniels early. And then Hendrickson went out with the concussion. And it was just DJ Reader just in there not being able to come off the field because they were down to 2 defensive tackles, him and BJ Hill basically, and just eating up the middle of that line. And then I think Trico even talked about it, is like, this is where they're down. They want to just run the ball at the middle of this defense, and they weren't. They had a little success doing it, but not great. And it was just DJ Reader in there in the middle, just mucking things up and not really getting much recognition for it.
Here's another hot take. CJ Uzama got paid because of this game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, he was good that year. He was really good that year, but he was tremendous in this game. The first touchdown of the game, he scored it. Jay mentioned the combo shuffle gritty celebration. That was a hell of a throw by Burrow, by the way. I mean, there were 3 defenders around him, and he gunned it in there. He had the catch later in the game that was impossible. I don't know how Burrow even thought that he might be open, threw it over the helmet of the defender, and somehow CJ made the catch. So he was great in that game. I don't have the stats in front of me, but
6 for 64.
Okay, 6 for 64 with a touchdown. If you remember earlier that season, primetime game against Jacksonville, he was tremendous in that game, 2 touchdown catches in that game. So CJ timed his best performances for big TV audiences and parlayed it into 24 mil from the Jets.
Any more hot takes before we flip forward, or things you need to get off your chest?
I don't have any hot takes, but there are 2 things I wanted to mention. Number one, did you realize that there was a Winter Olympics that year?
Yes, only because Tirico went directly from the Winter Olympics to hosting the Super Bowl pregame show. And I mean, like the day before, he was in Beijing or wherever it was, and suddenly he's in LA doing the Super Bowl pregame show.
So they come out of a break and they're like, coming up February 3rd, going to Beijing, the Olympics. And I just thought, God, when your team is making a Super Bowl run, you don't watch the Winter Olympics, because I have no recollection. We could have won every gold medal that Olympics. I have no recollection of that. Also, this is one of my favorite times in NFL history. And what made me think about it is they come back from a break and they got the guy at Jeff Ruby's cooking a couple of steaks. And then Drew Brees does a real awkward thing with the crawfish. But the chef is wearing a mask. And it reminds you, like, we were still, kind of coming out of peak COVID. But toward the end of the season, that 2021 season, like, teams were suddenly missing, large swaths of players. Not so much the Bengals until that meaningless game against the Browns. And then the playoffs started, and suddenly no teams missed guys because of COVID. And I was amazingly amused by that in real time.
Yeah, one of the more disappointing parts of that entire playoff run, personally, and I know Jay, we probably feel the same way. We weren't in the locker room.
Yeah,
we weren't able to be in any of those environments after they beat Kansas City. After this game, we were sitting like 10, 20 feet away in a press conference room in spaced out chairs. Like, it was just so frustrating. And I will never forget, in Kansas City after they won the AFC title game, we had to do a Zoom from the press box on the moon up there in Arrowhead. It was awful. And then all the TV people were just running on the field with their cameras. And I was like, screw this. I'm going down there and I'm just going to run on. No one knows what's going on down there anyway, and you're seeing all these face-to-face interviews and stuff. And we're having to do weird Zooms and try to sneak questions in and deal with national people asking if the diamonds are real and all that stuff. And I just remember thinking, like, this sucks. Like, you finally get one of the most likable teams ever making one of the most likable runs that will never be forgotten. And you can't even get into the locker room and talk to anybody. Like, that was such a frustrating element to that entire thing. What was more frustrating, though, that or having to watch this game with Salad Lady, Mo?
So I'll be quick here. I'll try to be as quick as I possibly can. So for the last 11 or 12 years, if Dan can't get to a UC basketball game, I fill in as play-by-play guy, which is awesome. It's legitimately, you guys know how much I love the Bearcats. Legitimately my favorite thing to do. So Bengals have a 4:30 playoff game or whatever time it was. And then UC had a game at noon the next day in Wichita. Dan couldn't get there, didn't want to cut it close. So I go. So on one hand, awesome. I get to call a game. I get to go to Wichita. I get to see that. Like, love doing it. Love it. At the same time, like, I'm not going to get a chance to see the Bengals' first playoff victory in 31 years. And what really made it sort of bittersweet was the team didn't leave until later in the day. So I still went downtown. I still did the pregame show with Tony Pike. I was still broadcasting from the Holy Grail, still enjoying the environment. But when you're in the environment and you can't go into the game, like, that's not as fun. So I did the pregame, hustled to the airport, left with the team, get to Wichita, and I'll never forget it. I was able to get service on the iHeartRadio app. And I don't think we were supposed to boom the game outside the Cincinnati area. I'm still to this day not sure how those rules work, but I got it as we were landing. And as we were landing, Dan and Lapp were sorting through the inadvertent whistle. And so, all right, cool. We land, everybody gets their stuff. We go to the hotel. We get to the hotel, it's halftime. And the hotel we stayed at sort of poured when you walk in right into the bar. The team is going to go do a walkthrough or film session or whatever. I just don't care about anything else. I drop my bags, come downstairs. I sit at the bar. It's me, and to my right, a woman who's like reading a book and eating a salad. And she is not paying a lick of attention to the game or anything else. As the second half unfolds, I go from quietly minding my own business to essentially acting like a clown. And so, and I mean, again, like when Kevin Huber punts it away, I'm assuming we're going to lose. And I'm like, dropping profanities. And I'm doing what everybody in the stands is doing, except I'm in a hotel bar. And now, because I'm invested, the bartender and this woman eating her salad, they're invested and they're watching. And so Jermaine Pratt intercepts the pass. They're going to win the game. And I lose it. I behave as if I would if I was in my seat at Paycor Stadium. And my phone's going crazy. And there's like, it's awesome, but there's no one to high five. Like there's no one to hug. There's, it's just this lady. So after about 5 minutes of me just acting like a moron, I look over at her and I said, I'm really sorry. I said, I'm from Cincinnati. The Bengals haven't won a playoff game in 31 years. I'm really, really sorry. She says to me, no, I really enjoyed watching you. And she proceeds to tell me that she was only in Wichita because her husband was in the hospital. He had been in Wichita for business, I think, and had a heart attack. And so she came in from Iowa and was staying at this hotel. And while her husband was getting treated in the hospital for a heart attack, and she said, something to the effect of like, it's been a really rough couple of days and watching you has made me smile. And so now, and I'm like a couple of beers in, I'm like, all right, well, let's do this. Let's get a drink. We're going to toast to your husband. We're going to toast to the Bengals. And we did that. And then her husband passed and we got married and the rest is history. No. But it was like this like really cool moment. And then I found a cigar bar in Wichita and celebrated by myself. But when I think of that game, I think of this nice woman who I'm sure had a really rough couple of days. So I'm sure just wanted to sit down, have a glass of wine, read a book, eat a salad, and not be bothered by a football game or some clown from Cincinnati. And she could not have been kinder. She could not have been nicer. And so that's who I enjoyed the Bengals' first playoff win since I was in the 8th grade with. And then the Bearcats won the next day at the last second, which was awesome.
I wonder what salad lady calls you.
Bourbon man
name for her. Insane man.
Obnoxious man from Cincinnati.
Yeah. Who are we giving our game MVP? I'm handing mine to Jamar Chase.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They had really nothing else going on offensively except they're like, well, the Raiders can't cover this guy. And it's just, it was just Burrow, Mixon was doing nothing. Higgins did basically nothing. Boyd was minimal. Burrow did his thing, but it was mostly like Jamar keeps getting open and I'm just going to keep throwing him back shoulders. I'm going to keep just targeting whoever's across from Jamar. I would argue almost if there was a hot take here, it's that this might have been Jamar's best game of the entire playoffs, and he had great ones just because they kept leaning into him to just own one-on-ones and find his way open and connect, even though he was obviously incredible in some of the other playoff games on that run.
Burrow. What are you guys talking about? It's the guy that was throwing him the ball and leading this team to its first playoff win since Seinfeld was on TV. It's Burrow. It's the start of everything. I mean, Chase was magnificent. Don't get me wrong, but the MVP was Burrow.
I'd written down Chase too. Burrow and Higgins, for whatever reason, were not on the same page. Tyler Boyd wasn't a factor. They couldn't really run the ball. They ran the ball 3.3 yards per attempt, and Chase had 3 carries for 23 yards. You take him out of the mix, and they averaged 2.7. And then when you look at PFF, he was their second highest graded run blocker in the game, and it was his second highest run blocking grade of the season. So I just thought he had an all-around great game after dropping the first play of the game, or the first pass of the game, which kind of took you back to the training camp of his rookie season.
Yeah, it was nice of him to have an ode to his camp there right off the top. Just a nice little tip of the cap. All right, biggest winner of the night, though. Biggest winner of the night. I've made my case already on this earlier. I think this was Zach Taylor's night. This is what he was hired to do, was to break this curse. He's in MLTs. This was about him accomplishing something that he was really hired in lieu of Marvin Lewis to do. He's my biggest winner of the night. Who do you guys, where do you go?
Former Bengals linebacker Kevin Walker, the guy who tackled Bo Jackson.
Curse of Bo.
Could finally sleep for the first time in 3 decades. Doesn't have to be asked about that. I've seen and talked to Kevin Walker since. I want to ask him, like, that night, did you just sit back and pour yourself a cold one and go, you know what? I'm good. I don't have to do the interviews anymore. I don't have to hear about it. It's not my fault. We're good. Biggest winner of the night for my money, aside from Salad Lady, Kevin Walker.
Biggest winner of the night, Bengals fans, the city of Cincinnati, the fan base spread out all over the place. All of those people that in that moment had that dazed, we actually freaking did it look on their faces. This was their moment. As much as it was great for the players and coaches, this was Bengals Nation's moment, city of Cincinnati moment. We don't have to worry about Carson blowing out his knee and Burfict and Adam Jones misbehaving at the end of the 2015 playoff game and all of the misfortune. Kenyon Martin breaking his leg. Anything that Bengals or Cincinnati sports fans consider to be a curse, it was all forgotten, at least in the short term in that moment.
Yeah, I had Zach and fans as biggest winners tonight, so I figured they might get mentioned. So I came up with a plan C, and I went with BJ Hill, because not just the Ogunjobi injury, but he had a sack in that game, a big one. It created the 3rd and 17 on that final drive that should have been the coffin nails for Dan and Lap. The 3 pressures he had in that game were 1 off of his season high. And it just kind of created, he had that huge interception in the AFC Championship game, and it spun into a couple months later where they had to pay either Larry or BJ Hill. They weren't going to pay him both, and it ended up being BJ Hill, and he gets life-changing money. And that was kind of the pivot point for him in his career once Larry Ogunjobi got hurt, and he had such a big game playing more snaps after Larry went out.
Nobody saying MLTs for biggest winner of the night. I mean, talk about having a moment. Yeah. MLTs basically just known for like dudes being dudes and frat bros. Goes from ML dudes to the MLTs place where they brought the first ever playoff win, game ball, that epic moment. Low key MLT's biggest winner of the night. But we
biggest loser, dude that carded Zach Taylor. Whoever he was.
How about millions right across the street? Zach, you couldn't look to the left. You couldn't have looked to the left. There's another bar right over here. You could have come in here. We won't card you. No, but I can't thank you guys enough for taking this time to do this, to go down this road. It's so much fun. I look forward to doing it again. So if you guys have ideas, or you know somebody who you'd like to hear what their favorite game is, or anything like that, nominate somebody, send it to us along with Blue Bodysuit Guy. We need to know who you are. We need to know who you are. Graders can be coming your way. Thanks everybody for listening to my favorite game on the Growler podcast, and we will talk to you later. Thanks everybody.